How does this bow tie look on me?
I'm all about movie.
Yeah, how's this tie look?
I dressed up for the premiere.
How's this tie
How does this tie look on me?
We didn't do this right.
Oh, we were supposed to make a show.
Are we recording?
Oh, it's time to make a show. We're making a new show today. Making a new show. Okay. All right. For real. Let's do this.
For reals.
None of us know how to make a movie show.
For reals.
That's the name of our show. That's the name of our show. It's for reals.
Yay.
It's for real. Okay, don't use the clock.
And failure. Hey everyone, internet! Guess what? We're gonna review movies now. Because you demand it, and we want to do it. So we're doing a movie show.
More the second thing than the first thing.
We just want to do it.
The way this will work is we'll be reviewing a few movies for our first episode. We'll have this navigation bar at the bottom of the screen, so if you want to skip to any of our reviews at any time during the video, you can just click on the name of the movie. Also, we might get into some minor spoiler territory at one point or another. If we do, we'll have a spoiler warning flash on the screen, so you can quickly click on another movie review, close the browser, delete your computer, burn your house down. All right, you guys ready?
Or maybe just hit the mute button for a little bit.
I need your help. But I wish I could trust you. If you did, you'd be the fool I always took you for.
So to kick it off strong, we're going to start with Thor 2. That came out a couple months ago. It's Marvel's follow-up to the blockbuster Thor. Me personally, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. It had its flaws, but overall it was a really good experience and a good follow-up, I thought, and a good kind of, progression of the Marvel agenda. What did you guys think?
I agree. I thought it was a rousing good romp through the world.
It was a rough and tough tumble through space.
Yeah. It was just all around, it was a really, really fun movie. That's the bottom line. Like, these kind of movies, I just want to have a really good time going to the movie. I like Chris Hemsworth. He's a charming, strapping lad. Natalie Portman is in it. And
that's about as much as I can
sure
say
is.
about her.
That's debatable.
Natalie Portman is a great actress, but it didn't really feel like she was trying here. She kind of just checked out and was like, this isn't Black Swan. I know I can do better than this. What have I signed up
this role
for?
does not challenge me.
That's kind of almost what it felt like. She was just there kind of as a joke almost.
You feel like Marvel's like, oh great, we put Natalie Portman in the first one. We got it. It's like they.
Are we sure we got away with it in Avengers?
Yeah. I thought the movie felt a little schizophrenic, and I loved it for that. I like that this didn't end with a big beat 'em up. I liked that there was a lot of variation. There was space battles, but there was also weird romance comedy in London. There was a lot of things going on, and I don't know. I appreciated the variation, and I'm glad that it at least did something different than we're not used to seeing with these Marvel movies.
It did end in a big, giant, ridiculous battle. It was a different type of battle than we've seen in any of the Marvel movies, just with the portals and things were getting teleported.
Right.
And it was cool to watch, but it did just end in a big battle with this evil guy that was introduced just for this movie.
Well,
we don't know very much about him, and that's another point. The villain was not a very well-rounded interesting villain.
I would say that the villain is probably the weakest part of the movie. But let me clarify a little bit more what I mean by that. I think we can agree that Thor is kind of Marvel's Superman. He's a god. He's from another planet.
Thor smash.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of.
And with this, they were like, let's make, instead of something like Man of Steel, where it's a god versus a god smashing each other, let's have science and make it,
Against
give
elves.
this gimmicky thing, this whole crazy thing. And it was also very comedic.
The ending was the best, one of my favorite parts, the climax. But it was a huge spectacle. Maybe not in specifics in terms of beat 'em up. But I thought the other best aspect of the film was Loki. And so I think that kind of, like what you were saying with the villain, kind of outshone the villain of this movie. Right? It's like, oh, man, remember when Loki was the bad guy? Remember when he was on screen a couple seconds ago? Which, to his credit, is awesome. He's really good, and his moment's shown. But it did kind of make the rest of the film like, I want more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so what would you...
So, I think we all agree that it was a fun movie. It was entertaining. You're going to get your popcorn worth. But there are some flaws. Natalie Portman, the bad guy, not so much. But I think overall,
I did see it twice.
It's a chunky film.
Since the last games, something's different. See it?
What can you see?
Alright, so the next film to talk about is The Hunger Games 2, Catching Fire. What did you think about the movie?
Out of the four of us here, I am the only one, I think, who has not read the Hunger Games books. And being just a fan of the movies, I have to say that I like this one a lot more. I felt like it knew what it was going for, and the tone that it set at the very beginning, it kept throughout the whole thing.
I have read the books, and I also agree that I think this was an improvement. I think that the second book is just a more entertaining book than the first one, just in general. And so I really kind of think that after the foundations they set in the first movie, it was really hard to mess this one up. I mean, the casting was really good from the first movie, the kind of the look and the feel of the world, but I think the directing was and the editing was tighter in this movie. They took a few liberties by expanding the whole ideas of the rebellion, and it was more concise. I felt like it was more, what is the point of this book, and they drove it home real well. I missed the Haymitch backstory. If you've read the book, that it's not even really a valid criticism. I just missed it. But other than that, I really can't find a lot to complain about.
I like the first one too, the book and the movie, but I definitely like this one more. I just thought the climax was awesome. I thought they knew what they were going for in terms of structure, in that it's called The Hunger Games, but it's not as much about the Hunger Games as it is about just the world. And they were like, okay, The Hunger Games is kind of the climax of this movie, and it's going to be about the world and these characters. And I thought ultimately I liked the characters that were introduced in the second part. All were really good adaptations on screen. All the people that got to play those new characters.
Oh, Johanna Mason.
Yeah,
God,
she was awesome. And all those the actors, but also the characters themselves. I thought they all had more compelling stories than in the first one. And even Katniss, I felt it was more apparent what her conflict was, and it was a little more empathetic in that. I don't know. So overall, I just really thought it was a really fun, awesome movie.
Yeah, I agree with all of you. I thought there was a lot of improvements made over the first. I think the actors themselves were able to fit more comfortably into their roles, and I think that went a long way, especially for the two leads. So what we liked about the movie was that there was just overall improvements made character-wise. The story is a little more interesting, gripped our attention a little more, but on the downside, it was still a Hunger Games movie. Still
I would say just
had to look at Jennifer Lawrence's face. Not that it's a bad thing. It's just it boggles my mind. It confuses my senses.
Because of her sheer beauty.
In Arendel's fair kingdom, a ruler did appear. Born with a secret power so great, alone she stayed in fear.
So the next movie that we're going to talk about is Disney's Frozen, the newest entry in the animated musical bonanzas. So go forth and talk about...
I like Frozen bananas.
So let's get this conversation going about this Frozen. So Ryan, go ahead and kick it off.
I enjoyed the film overall. Did not like it as much as Tangled though, and I felt the music was too Broadway.
Okay.
For my sensibilities.
Yeah, my opinion is really similar. I think I thought if it wasn't a Disney movie, there wouldn't be nearly as much hype. If it was just a DreamWorks movie, people would enjoy it for what it was, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I thought it was visually very appealing, but I didn't like the musicals. Characters were meh, and it wasn't very funny or as charming as Tangled or as some other.
Yeah.
I agree that I enjoyed Tangled more. Having said that, I have seen Tangled many more times than I've seen Frozen, so I'd like to actually see Frozen a few more times. I thought that the musical numbers, unlike Tangled, where I thought that it had a really good story that I enjoyed from beginning to end, Frozen, the musical numbers are kind of what kept it together for me. Like, Let It Go was, if it didn't have that, I would not feel the same about the movie.
I think that I agree with you in the point that the musical numbers are what hold this movie together, and that it is very Broadway. But I hold that personally as a plus. I very much am a Broadway guy. I love Broadway musicals, and I think that this follows very much in the early 90s Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast.
See, to me, it completely does not. I thought it was Broadway, which that doesn't mean it's bad, but every time I was in the movie, granted, in a movie theater, lights were off, you're in your own zone. I was cringing when they started. I was embarrassed, like, ew, this kind of feels weird. There's one or two, the Let It Go. Let It Go. Yeah. I thought, okay, it was good. And the opening, I thought, okay, you're setting the tone. But the rest of the music, I felt like, it's not feeling it.
I mean, out of place.
Inconsequential.
In further viewings of the movie, or just the second viewing, I mean, when you really listen to the music again, you really see that every piece is part of a bigger whole. I mean, every time they introduce a new musical theme, it comes up again in really surprising ways. Like it like, especially like the opening number, Frozen Heart. It's a showpiece called Frozen Heart. It's about the themes of seclusion and having a frozen heart. And the only other time that you hear that theme again is when, spoilers, is when Anna's heart is frozen. You get a few notes of that riff, and I think that the movie is full of those kind of things. It's very Broadway-y.
Right, I think that goes more towards good filmmaking.
Right.
Because you're establishing,
Doesn't mean the
these
song
pieces
is
and then
itself
bringing it
good.
back up. But the music itself, I feel like a lot of the pieces could be removed without consequence.
Something I was fearful of going into it was that it was going to try to be too much like Tangled, and I actually really liked the way the story wrapped up. And I don't want to spoil anything, but it's different than what you'd expect from like a standard Disney.
I guess
Kind
on that
of,
note,
but I do think that I was happy, but also disappointed in that it went for the complete cliche in terms of villains and antagonists. It's like
they could have
elevated themselves.
But the overall message that it was giving was different than standard.
I mean,
animated Disney film.
the messages. It's very much, this isn't a love story. It's a very feminist story, and it introduces a lot of typical Disney tropes and then breaks them down. I mean, it would be one thing if it just isn't in there, if it was just entirely original. But the reason why those tropes are there is so that it can have little twists.
The one counter I would say is that you're right. It's not expected, only in so much that it's a Disney movie. But that just because it defies Disney's expectation doesn't in and of itself make it amazing.
Oh, no.
That's how the story should have ended. How it ended in the movie. If you were to write a decent story, that's what would have happened. So I say, yeah, it's good that it's different than Disney, but I still don't necessarily think that makes it better than Schindler's List.
Yeah. So Chewy, sum it up for us.
All right. To sum up Frozen, or at least our collective opinion of it, it follows much in the same vein as what you'd expect from a Disney fantasy movie. It has the heroes, the princesses, the bad guys, musical numbers that are inspired by Broadway, and it's really going to depend on whether or not you like that kind of stuff. If you like what Disney's formula is, if you like musicals, then it's probably going to be your kind of thing, but it's not going to be for everyone.
Truly, the tales and songs fall utterly short of your enormity, O Smaug, the stupendous.
A last and final review will be for The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. Let's hear what you guys think about it.
I enjoyed it a lot. I did think it had some major flaws. Some of the same things as the first one. Ultimately, I did think it was probably too long. But overall, a huge improvement over the first, much closer to the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, and just really, really fun.
Peter Jackson's just going crazy, adding anything he wants and desires into the film for absolutely no reason. Fortunately, this time, they're all really fun and entertaining scenes.
I mean, I should say, for the audience's sake, I'm not a huge fan of the Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, Hobbit lore. And like I said, I did think it was too long. I thought Smaug was awesome for a while until the scene kept on going. But yeah, ultimately, I think I did like it better than the first Hobbit movie. I really liked Toriel. I think she was I think she was the strongest aspect in the movie. But again, I think that Peter Jackson, it was the same. It was in the first Hobbit movie, and also I've said it about King Kong. I think that a lot of the scenes just need to be tightened. I think the pacing just drags a lot, and I think with better editing, the movie could be a lot stronger.
With the Hobbit movies, much more than the Lord of the Rings, you really have to just kind of buy into the fact that Peter Jackson is making this his own. He's going away from like the original, direction that The Hobbit, the book, was written, and he's trying to expand it in a way that's bringing it up to par with The Lord of the Rings.
I haven't read the books, but the impression that I'm getting is definitely this was the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and this is the everything else that Tolkien wrote about this world trilogy. And so for that, I mean, I don't know what was in there and what wasn't from the original Hobbit book, but it does feel kind of uneven at times. There were moments in the movie where I'm like, was this meant to be this awesome?
Peter Jackson, at least for An Unexpected Journey, he was trying to have it feel like, yes, this is Middle-earth, but this is a totally different tale. But there were so many moments in there. Like, the ring is such a huge character in this movie. If you watched The Hobbit first, and you're just like, what is going on with this ring? And then you're like, oh, it makes sense in Lord of the Rings.
It's important because we know it all.
Yeah, I think this all speaks to a greater issue, and I think this is one of the bigger issues I have with kind of overall all of Peter Jackson, but specifically The Hobbit, is that he needs a little more subtle hand, I think. I think
Yeah.
That kind of goes to the length of it. Him hammering home, like, okay, we get that there's a Shire. You don't need us to be there for an hour, right? Same with the Ring. You don't need dramatic orchestra playing every time someone thinks about talking about mentioning touching the ring. It's just a ring. How about just have it at that? And you're gonna get so much more power out of those things because there's gonna be so much more attention to it when you don't force it, when it's a more natural thing.
You know, the keynote like scenes in the movie that are supposed to really stand out, like the kind of the little confrontation between Sherlock and Watson in the gold room, that's supposed to really stand out because it's such a contrast to everything else in the movie, and it's supposed to be two wits going at it.
It took me a little bit, the Sherlock and Watson.
I now understand.
I like how you're just staring at me blankly.
Yeah, like it's like the dialogue when they introduce Smaug and they're toying with each other is so compelling.
I just read that scene today with Bilbo and Smaug. And okay, this stuff you're talking about that's so compelling is taken directly from the book.
Yeah,
after that, it is all made up after that.
Hey, did you notice the dragon? There's a big dragon on the screen.
Peter Jackson, he just has a lot of problems just letting scenes go and just taking something out. His movies are just too long.
I do think that one interesting thing about this, and it speaks to a lot of the films we reviewed today, is that it's funny in that I don't know if any of them stand on their own because they're both second parts in the sequel. Except maybe Thor 2. Thor 2 does have a confined story, so maybe that one does.
Yeah, you can watch
but
that.
Hunger Games and The Hobbit, for sure.
Hunger Games where it leaves off. Like, what? How is it? That's not
I
an
guess
ending
that's
to
the end of the
anything.
movie, and then this is like, what? Oh, that's the end of the movie.
You mean you're ending right as doom is about to befall an entire population?
Right as like crazy stuff is happening? Yeah.
It's a love-hate relationship for me with those things. Because I love it, because it's like, oh, that was such a sweet cliffhanger. Like, yes.
I love it, but at the same time, it's like, it gets into the point of like, what is a complete story? And to me, and I don't say I'm not saying it's bad, but I do.
Right.
It's an interesting question.
It's kind of a gray area.
With Korra, going back to that.
No, we're not allowed to talk about that.
Overall, I think we'd all agree that The Desolation of Smaug was an improvement over An Unexpected Journey. It had a lot of the same flaws that the first one had, unfortunately, that it was too long. A lot of the characters didn't even need to be there. Some of them were too drawn out. But the movie had, like all of Peter Jackson's movies, the visuals and the cinematography were incredible.
Yes.
And I personally am really looking forward to the final chapter.
Definitely. Well, thanks for watching our review show, everybody. I hope you liked it. We're going to keep doing it and talking about movies.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Make sure you tell your friends, tell everyone you know. And hey, if you think there's anything that we could do to make the show better, if suggestions in the format, what kind of movies you'd like us to review, let us know in the comments or on our Yum Chunks Facebook page.
Or on Tumblr, or on Twitter, or on Facebook.
Or just go outside and yell loud enough and maybe we'll hear it.
What? We don't need to hear it.
That wasn't good. That can't be our ending.